the 774,000 jobs making the rounds. Then the perspective by NECA that as a result of this COVID, a huge percentage of businesses are no longer there. With job losses, the unemployment figure soaring as we speak, there are definitely challenges about jobs creation and the dynamics. Well, Jide Ogunsowo, our data analyst, is here to talk to us about the job creation dynamics, the unemployment figures. You've looked through some of these things. It's something that stares on the face, and COVID-19 doesn't make it any easier. What did you find?
So we can look at it from different perspectives, but it's good to look at the beginning of where all of this started. And it started from 17th March 2015. A tweet from the president-to-be then, at Mbuari, hashtag APC for change, hashtag jobs, 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 hashtag Chamberlain, 3 million jobs per year. And that's from the president's handle on the 17th of March 2015. So we have that on record. But I'd like to start from a slightly different perspective, Chamberlain, this morning. I've got 5 suites here, but I'd like to give you 2 options. Option 1 is if I told you that you could either have 4 suites and I gave Kayode only 1 suite, option 1. Option 2 is you rather go for no suites for both of you. Which of these options will you take?
Well, in the light of COVID.
Wow. Let me see. Which option would you take?
I'll just watch.
You're on the spot. You have to take a decision.
Yeah, well, I just have to watch and see. I'll internalize it first and decide how it goes.
Kayode, what will you do?
I'll just create a third option, split it.
You see, that's the challenge we have with jobs, really. It's hard to hold the government to its promises. Nobody really wants to come out to say, this is exactly how we said we'll do it. You don't want to pick.
But we didn't promise. I didn't promise I was going to pick any suite. So how can they hold me?
But you know, with jobs, a lot of Nigerians really want to understand first is we've had market money, trader money. So it's to first of all look at how can we understand and simplify the job creation process. And that looks at the social investment program. So I'd like to start from that. Let's take a look at understanding the social investment program.
Okay.
And if we look at that, there are 4 components to it. The first is we have the homegrown school feeding program, the conditional cash transfer, the government empowerment and enterprise scheme, which has the market money, trader money, and the farmer money. And finally, the end power. So I'd like to look at each of these things by looking at the good news and the bad news. The good news about the homegrown school feeding program, Kayode, is that currently the government is feeding more than 10 million school children. Yes, they are not yet feeding all the primary school children, but they are feeding over 10 million children. Now, the bad news is the number 1 challenge parents are having with that program is the quality of food their children receive. So the problem isn't just the quality of education at the public primary schools. We are looking at the challenge of the quality of food that these children receive. That's the first. The second is the conditional cash transfer. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is we now have a database of more than 11 million Nigerians on that social register. The bad news is we've got 100 million people that are poor. And so, yes, families are receiving a lot of monies, a lot of stipends, perhaps not sufficient, but the bad news is many more families are still poor. On the government enterprise scheme, which is the 3rd leg of the social investment program, that government enterprise scheme is where you have the controversies of the farmer money, market money, trader money. And a lot of Nigerians are asking, where are the beneficiaries? So the good news, again, on that platform is that, yes, we have 2.3 million people that have received some sort of interest-free loan, businesses that have really been supported by the government. So that's good news, 2.3 million people. The bad news is we have 42 million micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And so you have many more that are not getting the benefits of this. Now, on the end power is perhaps the most important and has been the most successful of the 4 social investment programs. On the end power, we've also got good news and you have bad news. The good news on the end power is you have more than 500,000 people that have been beneficiaries of this job creation program. Each of these persons have been spread across all the 774 local governments. That's a lot of good news. The bad news is, yes, more than 500,000 people are beneficiaries of the NPower program, but you have a country where 40 million people are unemployed. And so the summary of the government's social investment program is taking a bucket of water and pouring it into a river.
And besides, all of these schemes, they've got their challenges. The homegrown school feeding program, many wonder, look, how do they say they're going to be feeding people who are at home already? How are you going to locate them to feed them? Some question the rationale behind that. And then the conditional cash transfer, we heard the lawmaker speak about that register in the first place, credibility or otherwise of that register. And then the NPower, 500,000. They say they're going to lay off 500,000. Some are complaining of not having received their pay. So all of this, does that culminate into why you say having a basket?
The first is the federal government is acting as Father Christmas. And if you've ever been to their Papa amusement park, even at December, you will know that Father Christmas runs out of gifts. The federal government cannot solve all of these problems. The evidence shows that the states have to take on more responsibility for even the social investment program. Oh, yes, there are concerns over the transparency of the names on the social register has to be cleaned up. But if you have the central government trying to create a social register of about 10 million school children, of about 100 million people that are poor, then there will always be concerns about how you want to manage it. So yes, the federal government should offload a lot of its fatherly responsibilities to the states and focus on other issues like the borders, immigration, security. I talked about the NPower. Yeah. The evidence shows that NPower has really been successful across a lot of areas.
Okay. What do you mean by successful, really?
Okay. Should we talk about the success of the NPower and the challenges, or we should look at the millions of
Can
jobs?
we merge that?
Okay. With the NPower, what it has done is it's the only program we have that the government has run that has beneficiaries across all the 774 local governments. That is the fact. The challenge is the beneficiaries of the NPower need to move off the program and stop relying on the government so that more people that are waiting to join the program can also come on board. There are three things that makes the NPower very unique. It's that the first is it includes graduates from tertiary institutions. The second is it also includes non-graduates that are waiting online. So students that are writing German, they've even gone back to trying to see how they can bring in primary school children, which is good. Now, the third is among all the social investment programs, it's the NPower that talks about innovation hubs. And there seems to be a general agreement that innovation is the future, Chamberlain. And so while each of these programs has its challenges, we've seen a lot of success from the NPower, even though there still has to be a lot to be done. But I'd like us to look at, we need to understand the challenge we have with jobs first, looking at the numbers. And the numbers shows that there are 40 million, Chamberlain, 40 million Nigerians who are unemployed. Wow. Now, if you look at it from a regional perspective, we'll see that number one is the South-South. We have more than 8 million Nigerians who are unemployed and underemployed in the South-South. And then we look at the Northwest. We also have millions of Nigerians unemployed in the Northwest, and then we see the North-Central. In all, here's what is common among all the regions, if we carefully look at that, and that is every region in Nigeria has over 5 million people that are either unemployed and underemployed. But it gets even worse, Chamberlain. These numbers that we currently are looking at are the numbers as at the third quarter of 2018. In other words, Chamberlain, in the last 642 days, we have got no unemployment figures for this country. Here's why it is very important. For economic growth and progress, countries like England, the United States, Germany, release their unemployment figures every month. One of the ways we've been able to fight COVID is by we're releasing the data and number of people that have gotten COVID every day.
Gives us an assessment.
Gives us an assessment. So today, there's nobody that can confidently beat their chest to say that these are the number of Nigerians that are unemployed. Because the 40 million unemployed and underemployed that we are quoting goes back to the third quarter.
So we should treat this joblessness the way we're approaching this data that we released for the virus.
Exactly. So let's look at the joblessness virus to be able to look at another perspective of what is going on. And a lot of times people say foreign direct investment. But the evidence, Chamberlain, shows that the foreign investors are really not concerned about creating jobs in Nigeria. They're interested in making profits. And if you look at that, the evidence shows that in the last 5 years, and in the last 5 years, I'm talking about all of 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, we've seen $68 billion come into Nigeria. $68 billion worth of foreign direct investment come into Nigeria in the last 5 years. The challenge is the most important sector, the sector that creates most of the jobs in Nigeria, the agricultural sector, has received only $1 billion. You heard me right. Only $1 billion out of the $68 billion that's come into this country. Most of that money goes into stocks, the banking sector, finance. Very insignificant amount of money goes into those sectors that creates jobs. In other words, the future of Nigeria really isn't about relying on foreign direct investment. It's about domestic direct investment.
And how has that been doing? Because, I mean, so I hear agriculture creates most jobs. And then there's also the entertainment sector, which actually creates a lot of jobs next to agriculture. So if you say we need to look inwards, that's been the buzzword or the buzz phrase now. Let's look inwards in terms of consumption. Do we really have that capacity to say we can push these sectors?
Capacity in terms of does the government have enough money to support the sectors? The evidence shows that revenue is dipping. So we need to look at letting these private sector companies and organizations make the success themselves. So the government needs to move away from promising jobs because the government cannot employ people.
So they can create the environment.
They can create the environment. You know, the challenge we have today, Chamberlain, is every month, and I'm talking about every 30 days, and an additional 400,000 Nigerians are looking for jobs. An additional 400,000 Nigerians every month come into the labor market. And so even though the N Power has created support for 500,000 people, more than 500,000 people, it still is a pinch of salt compared to the challenge we face.
But if you look at that virus, which you were going to speak about, that joblessness virus, the dynamics there, because perhaps this might even help the government target in terms of if they want to come up with certain policies to move that sector forward. You say here that you found that 78% of Nigerians work with micro enterprises.
Yeah, so that is where most of Nigerians work, micro enterprise. And by micro enterprise, we're talking about organizations that employ less than 10 people. And so, arithmetically, you will feel that since micro enterprises create most of the employment, the government should try and find a way to support more micro enterprises. That makes sense. But here's the challenge with micro enterprises. The organization that creates most of the jobs in the country. The challenge is more than half of the micro enterprises we have in Nigeria are being run by individuals that have, at best, a primary school leaving certificate, statement of fact.
Is that a challenge in itself? Because, I mean, if they can create jobs in some sense, then is that a challenge?
So you can create jobs, but they can't grow jobs because of limited knowledge. So the challenge is you have micro enterprises that a lot of Nigerians own and also employ some people. but they are being run and managed by individuals that have at the best a primary school certificate. More than half of micro enterprises have, at the very best, CEOs that have only primary school certificates.
You know, there's always that conversation. Is it school knowledge you're talking about, or, you know, business education generally? Because some people might just have that primary school, but they understand business. They've learned about business. They've, you know, been tutored by the best. So are you talking about school knowledge or that, you know, business education?
School and business education. You know, one of the challenges micro enterprises face is they want to raise capital. And to raise capital, you need to come up with a business plan. And if you are trying to bring in investors, how can you come up with a good business plan if you don't have that school knowledge? How do you create your balance sheet, your cash flow, your P&L, your operations plan, on and on? How do you make your business attractive to even the other domestic investors? How do you get a loan from a bank if you are not able to come up with a good pitch deck or a good presentation? So that is the challenge. A lot of micro enterprises, and the government needs to also invest in other skills that owners of micro enterprises can use
And
to
perhaps
build their business.
maybe one other thing that might help is having looked at that figure and see, okay, if these are the people who are running these businesses, what was the curriculum? What do they teach them at that level in school related to business? So maybe we may need to tweak it a little more to address some of these things you talk about. How do you ensure that you keep your books? Because if anyone wants to give you some facility, they need to see your books and transparency.
Exactly.
They need to see some of those.
Yeah,
so if you
and
teach them
that's-
those basics, then they can grow with it.
And it's the basics that the Empower scheme is trying to do. The homegrown school feeding program really doesn't create a lot of jobs. Yes, it provides children with meals, and then it has the value chain through small-scale farmers. Then we have the conditional cash transfer, which really isn't a job creation process. We move on to the market money and trader money, which assist families or assist businesses to keep jobs through loans. But the Empower, the innovation hubs, are being used as platforms to improve learning, to improve training, to improve skill development. And I think we've seen a lot of success, despite the challenges of fewer people wanting to leave, get off the line and allow new people to join the line. We've seen a lot of success there.
So that's the Empower, which you say 400 Nigerians,
400,000 Nigerians, yeah. So the Empower has really created jobs. However, the challenge is the government isn't the answer to the problem.
You know,
400,000 people enter the job market every month in Nigeria.
so 400,000 people, right? There's been the talks about 774,000 people. So you've talked about the government being Father Christmas. Is this another Father Christmas thing coming up?
So the thinking about the 774,000 jobs is we have 774 local governments, Chamberlain. And so if we have 1,000 jobs in each local government, it brings up to 774,000. And that seems to be equal. The challenge is we do not have enough research to show that each local government, what are the needs really of each local government? And so you have some local governments, for instance, let's make it look this way, that some local governments need only 2,000 jobs. And so if you give them 1,000 jobs, you solve 50% of their problems. Some other local governments require 10,000 jobs. And so 1,000 jobs per local government is equality. The challenge is equity.
But we'll also need figures of the population of those local governments maybe to tell, you know, how many people actually need those jobs. And we don't quite have that.
You need figures, but perhaps the most important thing is, which we've talked about, is we're talking about 1,000 jobs per local government, but we do not have the data on how many people are unemployed per local government. That is perhaps the most important one, because based on the unemployment figures per local government, we'll then be able to allocate jobs not only based on equality, but based on equity. And like I said, in the last 642 days, there has been no update to our unemployment records. The Statistician General, the National Bureau of Statistics, has come out to say they haven't done it intentionally. They require more funding from the government. The government have said they haven't done it intentionally. They require more funding from oil revenues. The oil revenue companies have said they haven't done it intentionally. They are waiting for crude oil prices to go up. The crude oil companies are saying they haven't done it intentionally. They are waiting for COVID.
And
So who's been collecting my money then? All the taxes. Where's it been going?
Chamberlain, back to your sweets.
All right.
Will you take 4 sweets?
No, I'll give him all.
give him more.
I'll give
Oh,
him
thank you.
All right,
I'll
so
take
there
them
you go. Thank you for your thoughts, Jide. So our data analyst. We're back in a moment and look at your comments as well. Stay with us.